Hello, everyone, and thank you all for coming. It's great to see so many people here. I kind of thought there would be about 3, so it's really, really nice to see so many people. I thought I would start tonight with a sort of personal story about rest and how it's affected me in my life, or really rather lack of rest, because I was one of those people who didn't realize what tired was. And I was very lucky. I had a very busy practice, which I really enjoyed. And when I was in my 20s and 30s, I had fountains of energy, just fountains. And I could treat, 60, 70 people a week. It wasn't really, I didn't even think about it, and still go out on a Saturday night and still do DIY after work. And in my 40s and 50s, I carried on that way. But some changes happened. One of them was that I started getting grumpy at home. And I was still really enjoying work, still really going out. But when I got home, I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And I certainly didn't want to do anything. And it was a change that kind of happened so gradually and so imperceptibly that I didn't really know it. But the truth is that I exhausted myself. And the first way that it manifested itself, besides being grumpy, which only other people told me about, in my mind I wasn't grumpy, I was right. The first thing that happened was that I got pneumonia. And I had to have 6 weeks off work. And it was a real shock to my system, because up until that moment, I'd never really experienced illness of any kind whatsoever. And then bang, I was knocked over and I was weak like a tiny baby. I couldn't climb the stairs without getting breathless. I really had a big shock, and I had that period of going through life thinking, okay, this is the new me. I am now an invalid, and I'm not going to ever be able to play tennis again or even golf again. I'm never going to be able to run again. And I had to adjust my whole mindset to this concept that I just was never going to recover. So it was a big shock. I learned a lot about chronic illness. But the truth is I just didn't rest. And I got better, but did I learn my lesson? No, I didn't. I went back to work and I got sick again. So it took a few goes of getting really, really sick before I realized I too had to rest. And the odd thing is that I do actually know how to rest quite well, because I've done meditation for many, maybe 35 years roughly. So I know all about resting, but what I didn't know about was actually the quantity that I actually needed. So this topic has a personal interest for me, and I hope to save other people some of the trials and tribulations that I went through, by sort of sharing with you how important and also how wonderful it is to rest. There's another side of wanting to rest, or wanting to talk about rest, which is actually the clinical side, because it's always much easier to see in other people what they need to do more than in yourself. And very often in practice, people would come into me with their acute slip disc agony, or their neck, or indigestion, heartburn, many illnesses they would come in with. And I could see that really what they needed to do was take time off work, or at least get more sleep in the evenings, or deal with their compulsion to be clean all the time. So at work, quite often it would be frustrating because I didn't, they would have often been, quite a lot of my patients would have been better off not seeing me but going to a spa for a day and just taking the day off. So from a clinical point of view, although I don't think this is a problem that's unique to osteopathy, it certainly is, it is a problem that we osteopaths have to deal with. So there's the clinical side as well. And I know there's quite a few practitioners here. Is that true? Are there some John, I know you are. Hazel, you a little bit? Used to be? Anybody else? What's your...
I do healing, massage, and I do mindfulness workshops.
Oh, wonderful. So you must have some experience of this as well. Yeah. Have you had any patients in particular that spring to mind with this? Or?
I'm thinking also how much stress has to do with this as well.
Yeah.
The stress goes, then the body starts to relax.
Yes.
And automatically the two are so tied to one another.
They are. We're going to talk a lot about that.
I think stress is addictive. The more people get into that cranked up state, the more they do it and the more they can't stop. When I work with people with cancer, and I find that it's totally the personality. When they've gone through their treatments, they're all exhausted. Some of them just go with it, and some of them fight against it. I always advise them not to fight against it. Just, the body has gone through a very traumatic time just to enable it to get balanced. But there are people who can't do it.
That's true.
Yeah.
What do you do in that circumstance?
Mostly reflexology and healing.
And have you found people able to make that change?
With a lot of persuasion. It's one of my, there's something I feel I have to do, teach people how to relax, teach people how to breathe. It's not easy for some people.
That's very true.
I do spend quite a lot of time helping people to breathe and just to calm down and give them some relaxation exercises to do.
In fact, that's something we could all do right now. So what's really nice to do is just have a little wiggle. Maybe bring your shoulders around, arms over your head if you want. Yeah, because resting and stretching really have a lot in common. So it's nice to just stretch a little bit. Maybe wiggle our feet a little too. And the knees. And then we can just, I'm going to sit down, you're all seated. Actually, we could all stand up. That's a nice thing to do. And just, because, we often think about breathing, we're always sitting down. But we can actually breathe and stand at the same time. So we could try this, just, and it's nice to just breathe. And it feels good. So we can sit down. Well, I feel very honored to be in the presence of such an advanced group of people. Because it's very wonderful to have listeners who are able to actually join in and enjoy themselves. So that's a beautiful thing, and thank you. But let's breathe again, just for fun. So we'll just breathe. And it's nice to breathe. And we don't have, some people say there's right and wrong. I've never found that myself. In and out work for me. passed into a little bit of a meditative state as the group, and a slightly sleepy state as well. And now is a time when we can just let go. There's always pressing things in our lives. There's always unsolved problems. We all have them. And we don't need to run away from our problems. We don't need to escape them. But we can just say to our problems, not right now. Right now, I'm going to rest. And I'm going to enjoy the fact that I'm able to sit. And I'm going to feel some gratitude for my life. All the problems, all the difficulties, all the pleasures, all the joys. And I know that part of resting is simply accepting. It's not trying to do anymore. So I'm just going to let everything be, the good, the bad, and I'm going to just enjoy sitting in the room, being able to sit, being able to think, being able to breathe without difficulty. Being able to move my hands, not being paralyzed. Having a heart that works. Having kidneys that make wee for us even as we sit. Having livers that clean our blood. It's nice to rest in the knowledge that no matter what my body's doing, there's actually still quite a lot of good health in every single one of us here. And how good it is to rest. We can just sit a moment. But I can see some of us are tired, and there's a sense of sleepiness coming which we kind of want to avoid. So when you're ready, just come back and we'll chat some. Good. Well, I think I can go home. I don't think you need me at all. You're pretty good at this. So that's really nice. And especially because I can see that there's a lot of us that have experience of meditation. I'd be shocked if there was is there one person in this room who hasn't done any meditation? No. Oh, you have today. You have just now. Before now. Well, I think that, you know, with such an advanced group, everyone's going to agree that meditation is a very, very important part of resting. Maybe some of this is, I think maybe I pitched my talk a little too low level, but we'll have a go anyway. I still learned a lot when I did it. But certainly that experience of rest and taking time to rest, you know, for me, that's something I teach myself every day. Taking time to breathe is something that we can do. I think the trick with taking time to breathe is remembering to do it, and that takes discipline. And it's a strange thing to think that actually resting, there's a slight element to work to resting, because we have to make the effort to remember to do it. And that's not always easy.
I think a lot of people feel the resistance when it comes to rest, they feel guilty about it.
Yes, they do.
They feel they don't deserve it.
Yes.
They should be working hard.
Yes. That's a big barrier to
We
rest.
are our own impediment to.
Yes. And on that, with that, we can begin the slides that I've started, because it's quite relevant comment. So I find that visual images help my, when we talk about rest, there's physical rest, which we can achieve with breathing, and then there's mental rest. Breathing helps with mental rest, but for me, I'm a very visual person, and images help me. So this is one image that does that. Do you know what might be fun? Is it possible to turn the lights off a moment? It'll just bring it up a little more. There we go. So it's so strange how there's certain images that just they evoke a calm and peaceful state of mind immediately. And this is certainly one for me. You can put it back on if you want.
No, it's okay.
There's something about so just out of it is what do people see in this picture?
Tranquility.
Stillness.
Stillness, yeah. And reflection. What strength?
Clarity.
Clarity. How lovely to have sometimes I think this for me it represents how I like my own mind to be. Still, clear, reflective, receptive.
Even the mountain in the middle looks like someone lying back having a kip.
It does. It's a very laid-back mountain. That's true. It's true. I like the bit of ice forming in between, and that reminds me of all the thoughts that creep in when you're in this beautiful state of mind, and the thoughts creep in. So that, yeah. But this is a for me, these type of images are quite useful to just have around the house, or in books, or just access. They're easily accessible by everyone. I'm going to try this. Yay! But this is quite often how my mind is. I fall off my perch quite a lot, and I get like this. And then the question becomes what to do about it. And I think what you were saying earlier is sometimes being in this state of mind, you kind of get used to it, or this is your norm. And some people, to them, that's dull. They get, you get a rise out of that. Yeah, and that's an issue. So there can be barriers between and then the question also is, well, is it actually wrong to be like this? Because there's that sort of value judgment floating around a little bit, at least in my head, that the first scene is right and this one's not right. But is that really true? Yes.
When you need energy, this one.
Yeah. So we don't want to rest all the time. Rest is one part of life. It's not all of life.
When we meet that difficult place and notice what it feels like, then that seems to recede. It's being acknowledged.
Yes.
Is what counts.
Yes. Greeting that feeling from your calm and stable point of view, rather than being overwhelmed by it, and being present to the feeling rather than just being the feeling.
Even in that state, well, what does it feel feel like in the body, that also helps where once that's there and out there, then the calmness can come in.
Yes, yes. So how do we take a step back? I suppose that's a way of saying it. Sometimes if we don't want this state, if this state is unpleasant to us, how do we take a step back from it in order to be present to it? By meeting it. Any other ways?
By acknowledging it.
Acknowledging it, yeah, acknowledging it.
That's what I meant by meeting it.
Yeah, by meeting it. So we can say, hello, upset. How are you doing? Rather than, ah. Although I have to say, I often do get in that state where I go, ah. And I think for me, a lot of being able to rest and being able to relax is not expecting myself to be perfect. And it's actually okay to get overwhelmed by your feelings occasionally, or every day, as it happens in my case. And the idea that we can be Buddhas is true. Eventually, when you work hard enough, I think we all eventually, maybe not for me this lifetime, but while we're traveling along the way, wherever we are is okay. And for me, self-acceptance is probably the most restful thought I can think of. Just to accept myself completely as I am right now. I don't have to be perfect. All the faults I have, they're just projects to work on. And I have a lot of projects, but it's fine and it's okay. I don't have to be Miss Calm, Miss Perfect all the time. And I was thinking about this sort of like when we get this discombobulated, this stormy, this stressed state of mind that, especially in our society, it happens. There's a lot of stimulus that makes us tend that way. And I was thinking about taking a step back while I was actually creating this slide. Whoops, wrong way. And there's my kitten who helped me. So I think the Buddhists call it changing the peg. Just putting your focus somewhere else. And certainly there's something about animals that I find very healing and very, they help you tune into the wavelength that I like to be on. So animals that's definitely one way to rest. And maybe when we finish the slideshow, we might want to put up a few of techniques that we all use. So, okay. And this here, this is the founder of my profession, who is called Andrew Taylor Still. And interestingly, his most important book, it's not The Mechanical Principles of Osteopathy, which is one of his books. His most important book is this one, which is his autobiography. And I think a lot of that, the reason for that is because in osteopathy, like every other health practice, it really matters who you are. And I think it matters who you are even more than what you do. So you can have someone who doesn't have an extensive training in something, but they're kind, they're compassionate, they're able to listen, they're able to be there for the other person, they're non-judgmental, and that person might do a lot more good in our society than a very advanced, technically proficient chiropractor or even osteopath who whacks out 20 people a day very precisely and doesn't interact with those people at all on a personal level. So for me, who you are, it's very, very important. And this book, maybe should we have the lights for a moment? Good. Okay, and should we all stand up again? Because I don't know about everyone here, but I'm a little tired, and it's nice to just stretch. And I suppose that's the thing about resting. It's something that I feel we need to do regularly. Or we don't have to stand up. We can all sit down, just whatever. Just take a break.
Sorry.
Anyway, so this is his most important book, and it's quite nice because he illustrated it himself, which was a popular thing to do. He lived in the Victorian times, but I think that's I don't know. What do people think? Do people think that's a drawing, or do they think it's a photograph? It's a photograph, isn't it? Yeah. And at the back, he's got a couple of photographs. I guess they're just so grainy. But this is how he wanted to be remembered, because he put this photograph in his autobiography. And I think sometimes he left us coded messages, because a lot of what he thought and felt was very radical and very revolutionary and very much at that time considered off the wall. And to this day, his thinking is still completely beyond the pale for a lot of health practitioners and a lot of osteopaths. I think the coded message here really is about rest. That he had the freedom and the liberty to actually sleep in the middle of the day. He was taking a nap in the middle of the day. And you can see how relaxed he was. You can see that sort of ease that he has in his body. And I think there's a very potent and coded message there, which is that, you know, this is something that he felt was very, very important in life. And I think I tend to agree. And another aspect to rest, obviously, is relaxation. And this is Andrew still relaxing. And he was conceived, you can see that he was quite eccentric by the fact that he hung up bones from a tree. But with his eccentricity, well, I suppose, you know, he had a certain genius, and part of his genius was that he was true to himself, and he did what he felt was important in life. And it's quite interesting because he said, the title for this underneath, I don't know if you can see this, he says, "I found it more pleasant to study osteopathy in the country." And that brings us to something that we've been sort of skirting around the edges of, which is the role of nature and rest. And this is us taming nature, obviously. And I put this slide in because we were talking about, well, sometimes it's hard to rest because our minds are agitated. And Andrew Still, he suffered a lot in his lifetime. He had major, major suffering. He, as a young man, plowed quite a few acres of corn, just like this. And he was all set up for the next year. He was going to have a great harvest. He was a young man. He had family and children to feed. And on the morning of the 4th of July, a hailstorm came and wrecked his crop. And at that time, you couldn't go down to Sainsbury's and buy more. There wasn't any, that was it. That was his subsistence for the year gone. And he had a family to feed, and he actually was worried that they might starve, because people did in America then. His misfortune, it was our gain in some ways, because one of the things that he did in order to support himself was to start doctoring. So we can thank his suffering for that, but it also deepened him as a person. And it's nice to think of him resting in later life, knowing that he'd gone through some really great suffering. Other things that happened to him were that at that time he lived on the prairies in America where there were lots and lots of mosquitoes, and the mosquitoes carried all kinds of endemic diseases. And his wife and 3 children all died in a very short space of time. They all had meningitis. And it's interesting because we often think, oh, you know, meningitis isn't an easily transmissible disease. But this is a sort of personal thing. I have a brother who lived in Chicago, which is very close to where Still was working. And my brother actually died of virally transmitted meningitis that he got from a mosquito. So sorry?
She's surprised that meningitis could be transmitted by a mosquito.
Yes. No. You've heard of bird flu?
Yes.
Well, my brother got a disease called West Nile virus, which is carried by birds, and it's a cycle that goes from birds to mosquitoes. And most people don't have any symptoms if they get bitten by an infected mosquito. The first thing that happens when the virus comes into the area is all the birds die. That's how you know that it's in the area, because you see dead crows on the street. But most people who get bitten don't have any symptoms at all. And about 10% get a mild flu, and then 1 in X million get meningitis from it and die. And that's what happened to my brother. So, but at that time in America, people had much less immunity because we were Europeans coming fresh into that area. So our reaction to those same mosquitoes would have been much greater. Just like, you know, the Native Americans all got smallpox because we through the generations we hadn't developed any herd immunity. So he suffered a lot. And at the end of his life, he was still able to relax. And some of that was because he developed a very strong personal philosophy. And part of his philosophy was that he believed deeply in the perfection of nature. That somewhere deep in everything that exists, there is a perfection. And he felt that the way to learn to become an osteopath, he said, was that you have to study at the University of Nature. And he said that he himself studied at that university, and he was guided through all the classes by a man called Professor Peacock. And he said that Professor Peacock taught him all the wonders of the universe. And in particular, through the colors on his tail. Should we turn the light off again just for a moment? So Andrew Still felt that if we could understand that he used the word God, which maybe in this group is acceptable. You could also use the word nature or rational, I don't know, whatever you want to use. That thing that makes life happen, that thing itself is the greatest artist and painter in the universe, and the greatest chemist. And if we understand that, how can I use that? Can I use the God word here? Anybody object? The Spirit, say. Andrew Still, he used God. And what he said is that to graduate from the University of Nature, I'll use nature itself, that's a good word. To graduate from the University of Nature, we must understand that nature herself is both the finest painter and chemist in the universe. And if we can see that in the beauty of a peacock's tail, then we can consider ourselves graduates of that university. And that philosophy guided him through life. And some of that philosophy, there's a picture of him, some of that philosophy he learned from the Native Americans. He had the good fortune to live on a Native American reservation for 2 years when he was a young man. And he learned their healing techniques, and he learned their language as well. He learned the Shawnee language. And there's some coded messages, I feel, in this painting. This is a photograph. And one important thing about this photograph is you see he has his cane with him. Because during the Civil War, he suffered very bad hernias, so much so that they disabled him. At that time, I suppose the surgery wasn't available to repair them. So he walked with a limp all of his adult life. And yet, he espoused the philosophy of perfection. So there's a puzzle there, which I feel is very important to figure out. And to be able to square being crippled partially and still being perfect. And I suppose that's the graduate school of nature. But I think that's the message in that photograph. And I want to just, if you can see, there's some scribble at the bottom of it. And you can see, I've taken enlarged the corner, and that's the name the Native Americans gave to him. So I think he's also saying that what the philosophy and understanding that he gained from the Native Americans was very important to him through all his life. And I think it's part of his understanding of the beauty and the importance of nature. He was a very religious man, but he said that he had no use for churches, because as far as he was concerned, most churches caused rivers of blood to flow. But what he did do was that this is Tecumseh. He's a Shawnee Indian. Tecumseh was a really great warrior who lived in the generation just before Andrew Still. And during the War of 1812, the Native Americans realized that the white people who lived in America were a big threat, obviously, to the Indian population. And Tecumseh, he formed a federation of all the different tribes in the Midwest of America. So like the Cherokee, the Mohicans, the Shawnee, the Kickapoos. There was a federation of quite a few tribes, and they banded together, and he led them as a general, fighting against the white people there. And then he cleverly joined sides with the British, who were also still trying to fight against America. He eventually lost, but he was such a great warrior that several American Navy battleships have been named after him. And he had a wonderful philosophy, which I think he might be. Can we have the lights for a moment? This may feel like veering off the rest topic slightly, but for me the relevance is that one thing that it enables us to move from the. I suppose that the issue of the talk for me is, how do we move from the choppy water to the still water? How do we navigate that transition? How do we actually generate that peace and that calmness in our minds that enables us to rest? And one of those for me is having a strong personal philosophy, having a set of principles that we that we connect to that help us feel strong about who we are and what we are in life. And that's something that's personal for all of us. But I have to say that for me, that's an important thing. And I think Tecumseh had a wonderful philosophy, and I thought I might just read a poem that he's well known for, and that Andrew Still would have been well acquainted with. And Tecumseh says, now don't forget, this guy's a warrior. He's a general, okay? And he says, so you can imagine this, he says, so live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Trouble no one about their religion. Respect others in their view, and demand that they respect yours. Love your life, perfect your life, beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long and its purpose in the service of your people. Prepare a noble death song for the day when you go over the great divide. Always give a word or a sign of salute when meeting or passing a friend, even a stranger, when in a lonely place. Show respect to all people and grovel to none. When you arise in the morning, give thanks for the food and the joy of living. If you see no reason for giving thanks, the fault lies only in yourself. Abuse no one and no thing, for abuse turns wise ones to fools and robs the spirit of its vision. When it comes your time to die, be not like those whose hearts are filled with the fear of death, so that when their time comes, they weep and pray for a little more time to live their lives over again in a different way. Sing your death song and die like a hero going home.
How wonderful. Where are the generals like that now? Oh.
That's a very good question. But we can be those generals. And I suppose for me, as well as images, these type of thoughts, they induce a stillness. And they induce a quiet and a rest that's beyond words. Oh, we can use the flip chart at last. Okay. Now, my writing is terrible. What color, anybody? Red? Blue? Last choice before you say blue. Okay. So, because it's most important what we take away tonight, isn't it? And so, for me, what takeaway is, how can we rest? What can we do to rest? Okay? And so, for me, images. Images are restful, can be restful. Thought. How do we say this type of thought? Noble thought? Wise? Wise seems so trite.
To feel thankful.
Gratitude.
Gratitude.
Should I put feeling gratitude or just gratitude?
Gratitude.
Gratitude. Gratitude, yes. Acceptance.
Being in the moment.
I'll put pets. Well, I'm serious about, for me, pets are really important because they kind of lighten you up, you know? They could.
Nature.
Nature.
Music. Music.
Music. Yes. Good.
Time for you.
Yes. Be nice to get them all on one. I've written rather too. I didn't know we'd be so prolific. Okay. Time for you. Yes. We can add to this as we go along. How about play? Yes. I've got a slide on play. Some
Coming in meditation.
meditation. Yes. Prayer. Praying. Praying. Yes.
Awareness.
Awareness. Yes.
Love.
Love. Yes.
Connection.
Connection. You know all my slideshow. You do. You know every single slide I've got. Connection.
Mindfulness.
Mindfulness. I guess we could take them up along there if we wanted. Is that possible? Blue tag. Yeah.
Isn't that same as being in the moment, really?
Yes.
Mindfulness.
But you know, different words, sometimes if it touches,
Yeah.
I think it's fine to use different words for the same thing.
Balance.
Balance. It's funny how sometimes even just thinking a word can help you go there.
Breathing.
Breathing. Yeah.
Sharing. Creativity.
Sharing, create. Is that two words or one?
Two.
Two. Sharing and creativity. Yes. Actually, you know what would be fun to do? We can collect some of these into groups. Sharing. Good. That would be lovely, Tim. Okay, and while Tim is doing that, I will look for this. Here we are. Okay, right, so here's Tecumseh, and we had a moment.
What was his name?
Tecumseh, Tecums. Here, you can have. Do you want that? You can have it if you want.
Oh, thank
It's his. If you just look him up, that poem is so well known. You know he. Yeah.
Could you spell his name?
Yeah, sure. It's Tecumseh. Do you know what's really interesting? Is that, and I don't even know if this is true anymore, but certainly in my generation, every American kid knew who Tecumseh was. He was he's a well-known Native American. This is a good project for me when I go back home, is to ask some kids if he's still known. I don't know, but certainly in my childhood he wasn't known for that. We knew him as kids because he was such a great warrior. But yeah, okay. So one of the practices that Andrew still learned though from them was to pray at trees. When I have to say I have quite a few tree stories, but when I was a young kid, I used to love climbing trees, and there was one particular tree that I could get to the very top of the tree, like way right. I was probably 7 and and I could get to the top of this tree, and I used to wait for windy days. And on a really windy day, I would sneak out of the house and climb up, and I would get to the very top, and I would let the wind blow me out. And oh, did I love that. I used to just love it. So I suppose that was one of my first tree friends. And then, this is sad that I have friends for trees, trees for friends, but hey, we can't all make it in the human world. So, but another tree that I used to really like as a kid was, we used to call it the rocket ship tree. And it was a catalpa, which is a kind of rare tree. Forty Hall, just outside Forty Hall. Do you know Forty Hall? Just outside the tea rooms, I think there's some catalpas there. I don't know where they come from, and they're not a very strong tree, but they have wonderful branches for climbing. And this particular tree had a trunk that sort of curved over like this with branches spotted out, so it could hold about 6 kids at any one time. And we used to go and all climb this tree together, and then we would pretend we were in a rocket ship, and we would sail around the universe in on our rocket ship tree. So that was one of our favorite things. Yeah, I won't go on. So anyway, but I find that trees are very healing, and I think that in terms of mental rest, spiritual rest, emotional rest, to spend time with trees it's a wonderful thing, and it's something that we can all do. We're lucky. If living in central London, for example, it's harder. So, and now this is it. So you were mentioning oak hazel. This is an oak, obviously. Yeah, I like oak too. And these are artificial flowers. And I thought I would throw these in because you can't always get access to fresh ones, and fresh ones can be expensive to buy. So it doesn't have to be real to have a nice effect on us emotionally and mentally. So I personally have quite a lot of artificial flowers in my house, partly for cost and also for convenience, and you don't have to throw them out. And, yeah, so. And this is getting on to this sort of like, well, how do we rest? What do we do to rest? And so obviously, you can have have a cup of tea in a very formal way is beautiful, like in a mindful way. But we can do the same thing with an ordinary cup of tea. It doesn't have to be like that. So, and I don't know, but you were talking about mindfulness. And for me, tea time is a really nice time to take a break. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about is sometimes we can rest, and sometimes we can do the exact same thing and not rest at all. So a lot of resting is really about coming away from our mental problems and coming away from all the busyness in our minds. So if you remember when I had the picture of my little kitten on the screen, right? He got me away from my busy mind. And you know, and a cup of tea or a cup of, that's actually is tea. Tea can do the same thing. I can drink tea mindlessly and it doesn't have any effect at all. Or I can take a moment, breathe a little bit and enjoy my tea. So just drinking your tea, we can rest. And a lot of us feel, I don't have time to rest in the day. But actually, it's more about our attitude towards the world than it is about what we do. So there's many, many moments in the day that we can take to stop and rest. You can be busy and still rest. So. And someone was saying about connection and love. And resting is something that we can do with other people. And in fact, it's essential because our social connection is you know, I'm sure a lot of us are aware of this, but there's a lot of research that's come out recently that shows that social connection is actually our number 1 need. More than food, more than water, more than, well, I mean, not in some senses, but the thing that we strive for the most, the thing that our brain is wired for the most is to achieve social connection. And it's very, very important for all of us to do that. We're pack animals. So social connection is important, and it's good for our health. I'm sure you're aware of these studies, but if you have good social connection, and it doesn't have to be deep and meaningful relationships. If you connect with the cashier at the checkout, that's just as good as connecting with, you know, your sister or brother quite often. So just that act of social connection, people live longer, they're happier, and they have less incidence of heart disease, less incidence of high blood pressure. It actually is good for our health to come into groups like this and to be together. It's very important, and it's important for us to be able to rest and relax. So this is one thing that play, games, crossword puzzle, and again, this is something where you might sneak a couple of minutes and feel a bit guilty about it, and you do it because it's fun, but you don't get the same rest out of it. So if you can take the crossword puzzle and think, you know what, I'm going to enjoy, I deserve this. This is important for me. This is part of my health and well-being. This is part of my self-care. You can enrich your experience of doing simple everyday things that actually are a lot more important than people give them credit for. So crossword puzzles are important. And playing together is important too. So some of these can be shared activities, and it makes a difference in our lives. And it's good to have fun. And there's my pets again. So I have more than one. In fact, they're not the only two. But I hope you can see from that picture how relaxing it is to have an animal on your lap, and how good it is for rest. Okay, this is one we haven't mentioned, taking a bath. And it's the act of doing it in a way where we think, you know what, this is good for me. This is going to lower my blood pressure. This is going to make me live longer. This is going to stop me getting heart disease. So to elevate rest in our lives, I feel is something, you know, if we start doing it, it'll catch on in society too. Because, you know, I have to say that if we're a group of people who do meditation, you know, fashion starts in small places. And if we take on rest more seriously and elevate its importance, I guarantee you in 5 years' time it's going to be a much more fashionable topic. So taking a bath, and if you take a shower, showers are nice. We can enjoy a shower, and they're also really good. Doesn't have to be a bath. And here we are back to Andrew Still, and he perfected rest to the degree that he could take a nap in the day. And it's funny to think how, you know, we've been going on for the last 20 minutes or 10 minutes about, well, how can we snatch a bit of rest? How can we snatch a few minutes out of our day? And Andrew Still had the freedom, the inner freedom, to allow himself to take a nap in the middle of the day. So I suppose I could call myself an aspirational napper. And I think when I get to the point where I can give myself permission to go to bed in the day, then I'll know in some ways I've arrived. So good. Well, that's all my slides.
I'm laughing because I realise I'm very good at all of these things. But I'm terrible at sleeping. I'm
Oh,
at night.
okay.
Does that matter, do you think?
I think it matters big time. Yeah, I do. Actual sleep it's an important part of rest, and it's a hard problem to solve. My partner has insomnia, so I know all about it. And yeah, it's a personal project. Yeah, I think, and in fact, it's well known. If you don't get enough sleep, if you get less than 7 to 8 hours a night, well, I don't want, I mean, it's not personal or anything, but people who sleep less, they also, it's funny, there's a triad. It's heart disease, diabetes, and high blood pressure. Well, high blood pressure and heart disease are related, but they're also separate. But those three things go up and down with social connectivity, ability to relax, and amount of time that you sleep. All of those three diseases are significantly affected by all those things.
Also,
So, sorry?
Alzheimer's.
Alzheimer's. Oh, I've got a huge list, which I could read to you. Do you want to? It is almost tea time. But I did sort of look it up about if you don't get enough rest, your immunity gets lower, so you get more coughs and colds, greater heart disease, blood pressure, diabetes, anxiety and depression, Alzheimer's, and also obesity. People who don't rest actually it's a factor in weight gain. So, and I think some of that might be because you eat to wake yourself up sometimes if you're really tired. And also, when you're actually asleep at night, you manufacture more thyroid hormone. That's a time when you manufacture a lot of. So you actually raise your metabolism at night. So there may be some hormonal reasons why that's true as well. So yeah, on the fear factor side, if you want to motivate yourself to rest, those are all consequences of not doing it enough. So there's the downside and the positive side, and I very much enjoyed sharing all that with you tonight. So thank you. Good. Okay. And if anyone wants to, the only thing I forgot to mention is osteopathic treatment. because sometimes you have there's a physical barrier to resting. If you have pain, okay, pain can interrupt your sleep. And also, there's other physical things that can interrupt you. Coughing, if you have coughing, that can interrupt your sleep. Inability to lie flat can interrupt your sleep. So sometimes there's physical reasons why. So that can be a good reason to come for treatment. And the other thing is that if you have trouble relaxing, if you do all these things but you still have trouble relaxing, a good osteopath, this isn't true for only for osteopaths, acupuncturists are good at it, there's other professions as well, but a good osteopath will know how to guide your body and your mind into a state of relaxation. So if you have trouble with stress and inability to relax, osteopathic treatment can help. And I brought my table in case you want to watch me put somebody to sleep. I do it regularly at work. I always say that, people who fall asleep on my treatment table are giving me the greatest compliment you could possibly give. So, yeah, so there's treatment as well.
Embarrassed about it.
Yeah, they say, oh, I must have made some noise. I say, oh, no, never. No matter how loud this nor, yeah. Good, okay, well, thanks anyway, everyone.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Because I had when I brought the flowers in, I had an idea for an exercise, but I'm not sure about it, so I want to ask everyone's opinion. What I was thinking is that it'd be nice for everyone to actually hold the flower for a while, because it's just such a nice thing to do. Okay, good. So that's the answer. All right. So I'm going to go around again. Okay. And unfortunately, the ones who are brave enough to sit in the front get the first pick. So there you go. So just whatever one you want is fine. There you go. And I just happen to have a handy thing here for not too bad. You're welcome. Guy I like a lot called Thich Nhat Hanh. Does anybody know? And he has a wonderful meditation that you can have on hand, and you do it with your fingers. Do you know it? It's really fun. So it's when you want to generate a really nice state of mind inside yourself. And so he has a set of images that he uses. And the first one is flower. Okay? Because what do we want to be? We want to be fresh. So we think flower, fresh. And not all flowers have freshness, but most of these do. So we can appreciate the freshness of the flower. Well, just out of it, anything else your flowers touching you? Anyone?
Colours are wonderful.
Colour, yeah.
Nature's beauty.
It's beautiful.
Perfect shapes. Perfect shapes.
I like how delicate how you have to be gentle with it. It's fragile.
I'm thinking because there's a bit of a wilting petal that to love all the imperfections.
Yes.
As well. That's like ourselves.
Yeah.
I think it's perfection. Actually, imperfections.
That reminds me of another Buddha. I'm a bit of a tart when it comes to religion. I do like many. But I do like Buddhism a lot. And there's that, out of the mud a flower grows. That's a beautiful saying.
I know nothing about flowers or this one, but it looks to me from the middle like it just keeps growing and growing and growing.
So it's infinite.
Yes.
There's yeah.
So what does it look like when it's a bud? Because it's completely closed and then it just keeps...
It has little, these leaves on that, they're like little fingers around the coloured petals. Yeah.
So even though these are getting a bit, they're wilting a bit, I can see fresh ones.
Fresh ones, yeah. Anybody else?
No.
So there's another way we can look at what we have, and it's by actually turning all the words off in our head. So, and Andrew still used to do this with bodies and everything, and he learned it from the Native Americans, and he used to call it taking an Indian look at things. And what you do is you imagine you're just a small baby or a child, and you have no language, and you haven't really ever seen a flower before. So you know how babies, they'll go, oh, it's a curve. So we want to look at this as though we have no, hardly with any thinking, and just let us, just take it in.